How have you dealt with the showdown? I mean, there's a bit to unpack in all that, so how have you gone about that?
Oh no, we did what we would do any other week. We review it closely and we look at the opportunities we had versus the result that we got. Clearly the result wasn't exactly what we wanted, but the brand of football we played was quite positive from the previous week. So, you know, we found out, we got further clarity on who we should be and what we should play like.
Do you say to the boys almost 9 times out of 10 you'd win that game? So do you review it almost as, from a process point of view, almost like a win?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to be balanced in this game, and you've got to be balanced in my job. You've got to acknowledge what the performance was like accurately, not just because we lost or won. You know, we tend to try to keep it pretty balanced regardless. And we did a lot right, but as I said straight after the game in my press conference, we're not happy because we lost, but we give ourselves a chance.
One thing you've corrected recently is you used to have letdowns after showdowns, but you won the last 3 now. You've also beaten Geelong. You
get me with strange questions, Rich. You get responses and letdowns and.
So what have you changed up to be able to cope with? I mean, it's such a big game, and then there's how do you cope?
Well, every game's big. We get that, and we're playing against a high quality team who you know, we've played a fair bit, and they've beaten us a couple of times at different times, and we've been able to beat them a couple of times. Sets up a pretty interesting week for both teams. I would have thought that we're both coming off narrow losses. We both need to win. So, you know, just so happens that we're playing against the Geelong team that we have to play against, and we get our chance to bring them over here and see how we go again.
What are the worst guess when you said before it looks like it's getting kind of an idea of more of the team you need to be, and that kind of thing, what are the kind of areas that you need to improve to turn, I guess, you know, losses into wins? Yeah,
well, I think the team we need to be has been clear to us for a long time. It's not like it's almost like we have short-term memory loss sometimes. We forget what it is that's really critical to us, and what we've come out and do is we get a reminder and then we come back and we play pretty consistent footy. That's the team we want to be and the team we need to be. We need to, you know, we just need to maximise every opportunity we get. AFL footy will always make it difficult, you know. If you look at things in the game last week and people look at the last quarter and the domination of the last quarter, we felt like we had a pretty strong, complete second half. You know, but the reality was they were able to score for 3 or 4 minutes in the game, and that was enough to get them the victory at the end.
Do you have to change much with Kane? I guess been out for a month, at least a month. Is there somebody in Sanford you bring straight in, or do you kind of shuffle?
With who?
Kane Farrell being out.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. Well, it's a challenge when you lose good players, and as always is a challenge. But we've got a bit of depth. I've said this before in that position. Unfortunately, we've got a bit of depth, and we improved that depth. We put a bloke guy Rosie down there, and he's going okay. So we've got some support down there that can help. We've got some good players and young players or mature players who can come in and certainly support that role. But yeah, there's no doubt we'd miss Kane Farrell.
How about that young buck who had 35 in the Sandford?
Yeah, it'll be interesting, but he's not a half-back flanker. So he's probably not going to come in and play half-back flank, but we will, you know, once we do selection, we'll work our way through it. But I think we should be really careful. We talked about Trav, we're trying to get him into a position where he can have a strong back half of the year at the very least and make sure he's okay physically. And I think getting him through this week and next week and seeing how he feels and his body goes is really important to us. But what level we do that at will be decided later on.
Willie Rioli, can you confidently put him on the selection sheet this week?
Yeah, we can put him on the selection sheet as long as he gets through training and everything today. You know, we've got to make some decisions around what's right for that. And you know, Willie's a pretty good player and would add to our team, no doubt, in the front half where we probably need a little bit more last week. But we'll just be very mindful and very, very cautious in our approach to whether we do or don't bring Willie into the side. If he's happy and coping and doing really well, clearly, and his footy's not an issue. We just got to make sure that he's emotionally in the right spot. Which it looks really, really positive in that space because he's had a pretty good week.
How is he emotionally? How is his mindset?
As I said, he seems like he's in a pretty good spot. He's had a lot of support from our footy club, and I think he certainly appreciates that. He's had probably a lot of support from the community now, which certainly also helps.
When do you know, like, if he's fully okay? Like, you know, when you said at the moment it seems like he's okay. How do you fully know before it? Okay.
We'll see him. We'll watch him. We'll see how he trains, and we'll make sure he's okay. But you know, when he's smiling, he's pretty good. When he's smiling, and you know, and last week he didn't smile very often.
He addressed the group. I think Jason said this morning that he addressed the group just to express his gratitude to their support.
Yeah, without going into too much detail, because that's a personal situation and private situation. You know, our group understands, and Willie certainly does appreciate their support.
So that middle round's always important. How poignant is it that is the week that he comes back in, and how poignant is it given the conversation?
Well, I think it's probably more about the broader conversation and not just Indigenous round. I think it's a broader long-term conversation which our club's been really, really strong on, and certainly opened an opportunity for people to get education on around some of the issues. But it's a really proud moment for all our Indigenous players, these rounds. So I'm sure they'll be all out there wanting to do themselves and do their clubs proud.
Do you have to factor in at all the fact that it's against Geelong and that was one of the 3 teams you had to run with?
No, not at all. I think that's okay. I think we'll deal with the moments when they come and what happens with there. But as I said, I think there's been an issue that's been highlighted that I think most people would be pretty respectful about.
Is that a positive, Ken, that you can sense that the wider AFL community now is putting it on the table and discussing it as your club wanted?
Well, I think that was the point of what we did last week as a club, led by Chris. It was to make sure people just have a bit more understanding of what goes on here. And I think if that's been highlighted well enough, and that helps all the Indigenous players that play in our great game, and we create more of those players to come into our game and not dwindling those numbers, we make them feel like this is a safe place for them to come and enjoy and express themselves as footballers. I think that's a huge positive.
It's a whole team when you look at guys like Cyril or Adam Goods who are sort of lost to the game. How sad does that make?
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly sad that that's what's happened, and the game's made them feel that way. We have to own that. That's the way they feel. I don't know either of the 2 boys personally, so I can't comment on their own circumstances, but I do know Willie, and I think that game makes them feel a bit that way at times, and that should never happen in today's world.
So you've been worried at times that you've been, I guess, concerned that Willie could end up being like them, lost to the game?
Well, I think he's had a lot of challenges. I mean, lots along his journey, some that he's caused and some that he certainly hasn't caused. So we would just like to think not just Willie. I think Indigenous round. We've got a program that's going to be running here Thursday and Friday that's going to have 700 plus kids here. We're putting all our effort into making sure that there's an opportunity for young Indigenous people to come into the AFL and feel like it's a great program to be a part of, and it's a great place to be a part of. Not some of the awkward, nasty and stuff that shouldn't be done.
Where's Brandon Zerk-Thatcher? We've been asking week by week. He's building. He continues to build. We've got our 2 talls have been pretty good for us. He's coming from a long way back from that injury that he had, and that was a long time out. We've just got to give him time to make sure he gets his confidence up. If needed, we would bring Thatch in pretty quickly. Again, we'll go through selection, but he was pretty good last week, we think. So I think he'd be unlucky not to hold his spot.
What do you give you the Sweetie haven't been giving you for the last couple of weeks?
I think Jordan's been really good for us for a good period of time. He's played against some really good opponents in his last 3 or 4 AFL games, which has made it quite challenging for him. And we probably just haven't had quite the connection between our ruck and our mids. And I think we've seen a significant growth in that area last week with just a slight adjustment with the person who was in the ruck for us, and that helps us a lot. Jordan just needs to make sure that connection between him and his mids is a little bit better than it was.
I think he had to give you a Rucci stat. I think his percentage of hit outs to advantage were the best for any ruck in the league for the week. Is that the key? Do we get too lost in hit out numbers, which Sweetie was
you do.
the league in, and not who he's hitting to?
Correct. That's great education for you that you've done some work on what's real, and I think that is real. Just because you get hit outs doesn't necessarily mean you get an advantage. For us, it's about the collective group, that team that works together around the ball have to be successful together. And whether that's the people on the ground or the person in the air, you need to make sure your connection's there.
Hugh Jackson's been on your list for 4 years. Is he any closer to?
Yeah, he's really close at the moment. Hugh, he's played really well. Him, Will Lorenz, they've been building some pretty solid form in the sample, and it's not always been easy for us at that level. We've had a number of people missing, so. But they've certainly built some really solid form. We think they're right on the cusp of getting an opportunity, but at the moment, they still haven't had that opportunity, and Hugh would be pretty desperate to get that chance. So optimistic around what the back half of the year may look like for Hugh.
Just on the fallout from the umpires, not stopping the game for Lockie Schultz's concussion against Fremantle.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah, I guess what are your thoughts on it? How are you feeling the 4 umpire systems working at the moment from a coach?
It's clearly not perfect, and it's not working, the way I'm sure everyone at the AFL would like it to work. Perhaps, I seen an incident on our game on the weekend where there's a deliberate out of bounds paid off Connor Rosie, which I thought was pretty difficult to see, and how you're going to operate in that sense. I think there's lots in the game that is really hard to umpire. But when you see the one we seen last week with Schultz, it would look pretty instant to me that you would stop the game. Now, clearly something went wrong and I wasn't involved, and I'm not involved, so I don't need to answer it too much, but we would hope more often than not that would be the case.
It's 2 weeks in a row though the AFL hasn't done its full due diligence. You were at the centre of the first one and then this one. Do you have concerns of the way the AFL is handling these matters and the game at the moment?
Look, I think the broader AFL community would suggest that there's not great consistency around some of the matters, and that when you get inconsistencies, you do get some doubt, I suppose, and you get lack of confidence at times. But it's a pretty hard game to manage, and a pretty hard game to get right all the time for us as coaches and players. I'm sure it's the same for administrators. And all we could ask is that you review that and you get better at that. And the consistent message would be that there seems to be a fair bit of confusion going around at the moment.
You say the broader AFL community, are you including yourself in that? Is that you making that statement as well?
Yeah, I'm part of it. No doubt I'm a part of it, because I think there's been times where it hasn't quite been, we had, as you said, our incident the week before, which I can comment on a little bit more, but, I think there's some issues going on at the moment that I'm sure the AFL would much rather be done better.
And just one more, sorry, back on Will, I didn't get a chance to ask one. This is his first game going back into the heat of battle. Obviously, it's up to all of the team to support him, but do you task a couple of players in that forward line just to keep an eye on him, given once you cross that white line, it's different, regardless of what Geelong players do in terms of how he handles it?
No, not really. No, the team play together every week. Whether it's Willie or another person in the team, they're out there to look after each other all the time, so I don't think it needs any special attention.
What do you make of the Cats? I mean, they're talk about consistency. They benchmark of it, but what are you making of them this year?
Oh, well, they've been in pretty good form. There was a pretty good game last week that I watched, and absolutely our best is going to be needed. And we've seen them over here only a few weeks ago come over and win, so they don't mind playing at Adelaide Oval. I think it's pretty similar to what they're used to playing on. So, high quality team, incredibly well coached and run. We know it's going to be a challenge. We look forward to it.
Miles Bergman sending himself to the midfield line meetings this week. Where's he going?
Yeah, well, he didn't go last week and he ended up in the midfield, so this week he might go to the midfield meetings and end up back in the back line or on the wing. No, he's great flexibility for us. He does give us great coverage in lots of areas. We know he can play back, wing, maybe forward.